Welcome to The Difference Engine, the show for tech founders, investors, and innovators.
Here's what's coming up in our first episode of 2025. We ask if our obsession with an AI feature is distracting us from today's critical tech. We'll also find out what happened to category plays of the past. Are they schmoozing, snoozing, or losing? But first, Intel. What does 2025 look like for this former category leader?
Every now and again, on the Difference Engine, we like to look back, not with anger, but with Intel.
And occasionally we also like to give ourselves a pat on the back.
Indeed. Why not?
And indeed, why not?
It's the time of year to do that.
So back in episode 31, I think, at approximately 23 minutes and 25 seconds into that episode, we looked at one of our favourite subjects, which would be categorise or be categorised. And the subject of that section was the absolute state of the former semiconductor category leader, Intel. We concluded that revitalising Intel in the age of AI was going to be a struggle, and that the very respected CEO Pat Gelsinger was probably not having a great time at work. Given the nature of the turnaround task, and despite the huge sums of public money being showered in Intel's direction by the US administration, that might help cushion any transition to the aforementioned age of AI. But, even that looked in doubt. And in recent weeks, it was revealed that the Biden administration planned on reducing part of Intel's $8.5 billion in federal funding for computer chip plants around the country. According to three people familiar with the grant, i.e. presumably working on the grant but didn't want to admit it, who spoke to the UK's esteemed broadsheet, The Guardian.
But isn't this a bit strange? Because surely if anybody's going to subsidise US manufacturing, it would be the Biden administration.
Yes, indeed. But clearly they had a little bit of a volte-face. But actually, it's believed that this was linked to the $3 billion that Intel is also receiving to provide computer chips for the US military. So Biden announced agreement to provide Intel with up to 8.5 originally, direct funding, and 11 billion in loan in March. Anyway, meanwhile, the competition around Intel was rumoured to be circling at the slightly injured former category leader, offering various M&A deals. So it was really only a matter before something gave. Well, something did give, and it was Gelsinger himself, a man who began his career at Intel right back in 1979 and was Intel's first chief technology officer, and returned from a brief sojourn at EMC to lead Intel in 2021, just as the dark clouds started to appear. Anyway, abruptly, he chose to retire. And according to the Intel press release, it was a retirement, inverted commas. Bloomberg, of course, on the other hand, said the board forced Pat out, giving him the option to retire or be removed. Apparently, the board had become frustrated by the slow progress with the turnaround strategy.
And wasn't it a previous CEO, in fact, a founder of Intel, Andy Grove, whose book, very well read book, said only the paranoid survive.
Only the paranoid survive. But never mind, Pat did appear to leave with up to $10 million in his pocket for making the, inverted commas, right decision. And, with his departure, the board, of course, pulled together and emphasised the need to restore investor confidence, refocus on product leadership, yada, yada, yada. However, predictably, the share price shot up as the news was announced.
You never want that Bulmer move. You never want it to look like that.
Never want to move like Bulmer on the stage, that's for sure.
Definitely not.
The retirement means, of course, that the board has formed a search committee to find a permanent successor. Somebody who wants to shoulder this.
You free?
Well,
$10 million if you leave.
Meanwhile, David Zinsser and Michelle Johnson Holthouse have been appointed as interim co-chief executive officers, with Frank Yeary serving as interim executive chair.
Co-CEO,
during the
you
transition.
say?
Yes, that's going to be an interesting dynamic.
That always works out brilliantly, doesn't it, co-CEOs?
Oh, yeah, it always
It's
does.
just amazing.
Yeah, I think it's going to work out even more brilliantly because Holt House has been specifically named CEO of Intel Products. I guess we should call them key business groups, which include client computing, data center and AI group, notice, and network and edge group. So I think we're going to be watching this very closely in 2025, along with all the AI hype that's frankly been instrumental in Gelsinger's departure. And we'll be expecting to see more speculation about a potential Intel business split.
Indeed, because somebody seems to have got all the good bank and someone's got a bit of the bad bank.
Indeed. What about the business units that Holt House won't be looking after, we wonder? Possible restructuring of the foundry and product businesses? Perhaps. The prospect of M&A is there, I think. The issue is, for anybody looking at the company, it's the complexities of any deal complicated by Intel's strategic position against an incoming administration, let's not forget, on the 20th of January, with profound America First leanings.
Where are we going on this? You think that Trump's administration will block any M&A?
They may interfere with it, shall we say. But again, this will be one of their first big tests to see if they can match rhetoric with action.
Just a little side note on the splitting of tech brands, as you hinted might happen here. This tends not to work brilliantly. I used to work for HPE, as you know, which split its product sets variously to companies like Micro Focus in the UK. And we are witnessing Veritas now split itself into Cohesity and Arctera. That'll be interesting to watch. I mean, these things are tricky to navigate. Surely it's better to keep good bank and bad bank together, cross-subsidize a little bit, and see if you can innovate your way out of it.
Well, we can't think of a company that's split and gone on to create a dominant category. And that would be one of our benchmarks about whether a split is going to be successful or not. But I mean, anyway, there really does need to be an end to this continuing uncertainty around Intel's strategic directions. The stakes are way too high in the global economy to have a lame duck of Intel's importance.
Yeah.
I guess, will Intel look the same this time in 2025? We don't think so.
Are you still developing separate marketing plans for each of your different channels to market? Can you really sanction messages reaching the same customers from unconnected targets? Listen, it's now the AI age. Things need to change. Positive is a different sort of AI-powered agency. From our very beginning, we've integrated marketing communications from PR to events, social to paid ads. Working smarter means working integrated. Let us show you what a truly joined-up strategy could do for your tech business. Contact Positive today with an email to hello@positivemarketing.com. Is AI exuberance hiding a more concerning tech recession?
Yeah, so for those that spend their days in the IT industry, it's becoming more and more apparent that enthusiasm about artificial intelligence is masking weakness across most of the technology sector. Has herd mentality enthusiasm for AI come at the expense of innovation in other less flashy IT basics that actually keep the lights on?
So, is this current AI bubble an exuberant, semi-rational investment spike hiding a more concerning slowdown in IT and perhaps even a serious downturn?
So why would this matter if everything's about AI?
Well, if you look at the recent financial reports, many tech companies, even the leaders, may still be considered to be in a state of recession. And that's continuing a slowdown that some of us in the industry have spotted for a few years now.
Yeah, and the sort of the irony, if that's the right word for this, is we've seen some massive share price gains for large companies that were predicted to be the early beneficiaries of an AI boom, such as, of course, Nvidia and Microsoft. The problem that it's just a sticking plaster over the reality of a horrible 2022 when the value of the tech-weighted Nasdaq Composite Index fell by almost a third, the impacts of which we're still living with today.
So we're all rabbits in the headlines, and anything that can claim to have an AI angle is outshining more traditional tech areas such as software, IT consulting, and the production of tech equipment for other sectors in the economy, such as manufacturing, the auto industry, etc. The latest Hamilton Tech M&A market report shows tech support companies as some of the few where demand is still healthy.
Yeah, but this is not just a reflection of uncertain economic times, thanks to warfare and a host of other factors. And these are the times in which we live, and they're resulting in weak demand. It's also a perfect storm combining the hangover from an overexpansion and overstocking of supplier inventories during the coronavirus pandemic and business overspending, in the belief that the changes in corporate structures and the nature of work we saw during the pandemic would actually endure.
We're thinking there's something else at work. Some tech firms have already directly suffered from the growth of generative AI in particular and associated data center spending. I saw the $8 billion that Amazon is promising to spend somewhere, and the South Mims data center where somebody's going to pay for it and the developer doesn't know who. So there is a lot of spending allocated to AI, but customers with limited budgets redirect investment in that area for fear of being left behind.
Yeah, and the result of this is overall recent financial reports show that the majority of large tech companies have been growing more slowly than in the past, while many of the smaller ones, which we rely on for innovation, are actively shrinking. And that's not something that tech business has been used to in the past.
Yeah, and the S&P 500 IT subindex shows increased revenues by an average of 6.9% over the past 12 months. Not bad, you might think, according to Bloomberg, but that's compared with a 5-year average of 10% annually. In fact, about 3/4 of companies grew more slowly than their recent average.
Yeah, Paul, other indicators don't make for better reading. Earnings per share increased by an average of 16% in the last 12 months, down from 21% over the last 5 years. It gets worse too. If you really look at the numbers, the weakness is more obvious in small cap indices where there's no boost from the mega cap groups.
Yeah, just getting deeper and deeper. You look at the Russell 2000 index, which measures the performance of approximately 2,000 small cap US equities. Technology was the second worst performing sector in terms of revenue growth in the second quarter, so quite concerning. And according to LSE, that's the London Stock Exchange Group, revenue fell 6.1% year on year, while profits were down 2.8%.
Ouch. Yeah, but the reality is that investor exuberance around AI-focused companies, it's still in full swing. But of course, big tech is not traditionally where tech innovation comes from, as I mentioned earlier. Mostly it's the companies that big tech acquires that have delivered the innovation for big tech to distribute.
And so apart from the big tech universe where everybody's saying AI, 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 the issue is that can the tech sector prevent a prolonged period of investor attention moving away from tech towards other things such as financial services and other sectors? Or is it a belief that it's only AI that's of interest in tech these days, and that we think is mistaken? There's signs that the old guard are getting cross because of all this throwing the baby out with the bathwater on tech spend.
Would that be Mr. Benioff leading the charge on this, as he so often does?
Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, has enjoyed a rip-roaring decade of growth, but now he's, and there's no other word for it, pissed off at the CEO of Klarna, the buy now, pay later service, who has gone on the record to say that he's kicking out Workday and Salesforce from his operations and replacing it with, guess what?
Could it begin with A and finish with I?
It could. So how that's going to work, I don't know. Presumably and hopefully the CEO of Klarna does know, but Mark doesn't know and is on the record saying what the hell is he going to use for his systems of record? So this is non-AI tech being kicked out for AI.
So this is existing tech that works being kicked out for stuff that might work.
Yeah.
Right.
Or is claimed to work.
So let's hope it's not beyond the bounds of reality for guys like Benioff, the big leaders in the investment industry, to move on from those big overpriced AI stocks to some of the more currently unloved corners of the industry in search of value. While few companies are predicting the sort of triple-digit growth NVIDIA has reported in recent quarters, there are signs that some of the worst performing parts of the tech sector are possibly turning the corner, presumably as spending cycles turn, and we think if some of the leaders of the current tech environment really start pushing things forward.
So, listeners, if health is going to be restored, it's going to require a much more compelling reason to innovate. That's what we love. That's what we're all about. Category creation, reframing customer problems. That's where category strategy comes in. The infrastructure we rely on needs to be refreshed. And it's not just technical upgrades, but the focus on where we put our energy and where our needs are met. We can't allow one part of the industry, beginning with A, ending with I, to dominate all of our thinking and, more worryingly, all of the investment.
So we think the industry and its investors need to take a deep breath and stabilize. The idea that AI is the only thing pushing the industry forward, which has been the case for the last 2 years, should not be the case for the next 2. The history tells us that the winners in every tech cycle have been the providers of the picks and shovels that enabled applications of increased sophistication and distribution to impact everything from the economy at large to our daily lives. Yeah, we know AI has the potential to move things forward again in applications, but not if it's at the expense of everything else and our ability to absorb it.
Yeah, it's time to remove this AI cloak, rebalance, and think about brand new categories, big categories in tech. Category leaders and those with the aspirations to lead need to double down on what they've been creating and not be distracted. And they need to make the case both for investment and for buying decisions that don't exclusively rotate around AI. Get rid of all the AI modifiers and buzzwords and focus on reframing customer needs and figure out how to best to satisfy those before, inevitably, the magical AI bubble bursts. You've got to learn to earn. So, we all know you have to learn if you're going to earn. So, Jonathan, what's the lesson for today?
Well, the lesson today is about losers, snoozers, and schmoozers.
All right.
What I want to talk about today is the fact that category design isn't all sweetness and light. Some categories are pretty much dead on arrival. Some categories are not instant successes, nor does an eventually successful category designer get it right first time out.
Whoa, that sounds like a massive downer. I was supposed to be lifting people up and thinking about positive things to do with categories.
That's true, but the reality is that some categories eventually re-emerge in different forms after a bit of attention and usually a bit of M&A. These are the schmoozers. Some may yet get to rise after a period of hibernation as conditions change. These are the snoozers. And some are long forgotten. They are the losers. But hopefully we're not going to talk too much about the losers. And so let's have a look at 10 cautionary tales and whether they were a schmoozer, a snoozer, or a loser. Number 1, the first one, smart home hubs. Now, the home of the future has been a recurring theme in futurology for a century, and in the last couple of decades, there appeared to be enough computing power, connectivity, and smart devices available, so at last you could really talk to your fridge. But there was a strategic flaw. Many manufacturers launched smart home hubs without ensuring compatibility across different brands and devices, therefore severely limiting their impact. It was a lack of standardization and interoperability that made it difficult for the people you're trying to sell to, i.e. the consumers, to integrate their smart home devices. That led to frustration and limited adoption. Remember Roomba and Google?
Oh, yeah. Investigated by the EU. And I don't know about your Roomba, but mine's sat under a sofa. It hasn't moved for years.
I never got Roomba. I'm still trailing my Miele around the house.
Landfill.
Company failure and consolidation happened. But what has happened is big tech and previous generations of cash-rich companies such as alarm systems and mobile infrastructure companies picked up the pieces. So I think, again, a little bit more positive, smart home hubs, I think they're a schmoozer. As the individual use cases in smart home hubs normalize, so integrated technologies will appear from some of the big players.
You like it?
I do.
All right.
So number 3. Wearable tech. Again, wearable tech from smart clothes to wrist televisions has been another recurring theme in futurology for a century. And yet again, in the last 15 years, they're appeared to be enough microcomputing power, connectivity, and smart devices available. So at last, you could connect yourself to the global IT system. Just a great idea, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that took off. First of all, you got the big running watches and the downloadable heart rate monitors and all this, the early, really, cringy versions of wearable technology.
Yeah.
There seems to be enough functionality coming together now that these things make sense.
The strategic flaw in all of this was manufacturers rushing to market with immature technology that actually didn't meet user needs or expectations. They wanted more and they wanted different. They weren't getting it. So, for instance, there were some really tactical missteps. That early wearable tech had really poor battery life, limited functionality, couldn't do much with it, and the performance was frankly unreliable, i.e. not accurate. Now, if you're trying to measure your heart rate, you need it to be accurate. And that damaged consumer trust and just slowed market growth. People got excited, then they got very, very bored with it. But what happened was it took a while for fitness to emerge after a battle between a number of early stage companies. And these were taken out in a series of mergers. And large ecosystems started to be built. And one of the key things too was for Apple to realize that just being able to tell the time in many different formats wasn't going to justify the expense of buying an Apple Watch. So I think, again, bit of light on this one, it's a schmoozer. I think we're just at the beginning of real integration, and particularly with the healthcare systems, which is going to be the really, really big, powerful, and hopefully beneficial use case. Number 4 then, HD DVD. There you are. I said it first time.
That's a 5-letter acronym.
It's a 5-letter acronym for failure. Oops, did I said that
Plot
too
spoiler,
soon, did
yeah.
I? Plot spoiler. Okay. Anyway, just to go back, HD DVD was a format that engaged in a format war with Blu-ray without securing sufficient industry support or consumer interest. Right? It's a video format, storage and display format. What amazes me about this is that, did they learn nothing from VHS versus Betamax in the videotape standards war? For those of you who aren't familiar with it, VHS became the dominant technical standard in videotapes, despite being technically inferior and larger and many other deficiencies compared to the Betamax standard. The one thing that JVC, who created the VHS standard, did was license it to other players. So therefore you got more machines with one standard and you got more software on it.
For listeners born recently, I should explain, this is in a time before the cloud. This is when you actually had to have your own medium in your house. That's what we're talking about.
For those of you who are now getting trendily into cassette tapes for music, they're coming back, These were just like great big cassette tapes. So why did this particular format, that's HD DVD, why did it fail? Well, it was just history repeating itself. Blu-ray's broader support from major studios and better marketing led to the quick demise of HD DVD, despite significant investment. However, there's a sting in the tail on this one. It was a Pyrrhic victory for Blu-ray. The world is going online and, for its high definition and later UHD video consumption.
So we don't even need that. We don't need this technology at all. This is the speed of technology meets an ecosystem.
We're done. It was a Pyrrhic victory. It was a very, very quick win, but that was a disaster in itself. And while we're talking about Blu-ray, let's go on to number 5, because just 8 years ago, Blu-ray launched Ultra HD version of its digital optical disc storage.
I've never heard a better Ultra HD, ultra high definition of an existing category. Yeah, that's a better.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an uber better.
Uber better. Mega better.
Yeah, it was an enhanced version of Blu-ray. You'd think natural evolution of the HD devices, televisions, and what games addicts have been buying to enhance their large screen viewing and playing pleasure. After all, Blu-ray had won the HD war with HD DVD. But as you say, it's the absolute epitome of better. And the strategic flaw was pushing a new physical media format in an era rapidly moving towards digital streaming. This was, to those of you who remember it, CT1. mobile telephony against cellular. This was steam cars,
Can't claim to.
Against internal combustion engines.
Bit before my time.
Broad gauge to standard gauge railways. DAT players to
before my
iPods.
dad's time.
Why it failed was that they were in the middle of a paradigm shift. The investment in the convenience of and the growing quality of streaming service made physical media less attractive.
And just to make this history lesson absolutely opposite to today's time, industry analysts are forever looking in the rearview mirror. If you want to dominate a category, they'll help you dominate a category that they agree with. But very likely, the world has moved on.
It's already too late.
Yes.
So, Ultra HD Blu-ray was a loser. Which brings us on to number 6. Standalone VR headsets.
Ah, the metaverse.
Metaverse-ish, but 20 years ago, standalone VR headsets were coming out of gaming. The first one on the market was really the Sega VR in 94, and then the Forte VXF1, who remembers them, in 95.
Nope.
Nintendo Virtual Boy in 96.
The Nintendo? No, I just remember the little... No.
Yeah, what could be more fun than replacing a screen experience with one of immersive VR?
One that doesn't give you a headache,
Well,
maybe?
but there was a strategic flaw here, as you would expect. People were coming into the market early. They were launching VR headsets just to be, they thought different, but with limited content, high prices, and significant technological limitations. And what did they get wrong from a category viewpoint? There was no compelling ecosystem of applications and games and valued brands in it. Early VR headsets struggle to justify their cost. Personally, I think the latest versions still do, but that's for another episode.
This is where we disagree. I think Vision Pro, I think there's a shot for that. Maybe not in its first edition, but soon thereafter, I'm pretty sure. And don't forget, Apple's got this amazing reputation as being a fast follower. The iPod was certainly not the first MP3 player.
No, it wasn't.
And the laptop certainly not, and even their Mac, original Macintosh, not the first. They fast follow pretty well. So I don't know if I would say the game's over here.
I don't think it is. I think it's a snoozer. But I think VR for now is really a B2B tech with potentially some very high value and compelling applications in healthcare and engineering in particular. Which, when we're talking about sophisticated stuff, that brings us on to number 7.
All right.
Satellite phones for the mass market.
Yes, please.
Yeah, a phone you could use anywhere without worrying about cellular coverage. What could possibly go wrong? Satellite phones started to appear in the late 1990s. But guess what? Big strategy flaw. They were attempting to market satellite phones to the general public instead of focusing on niche markets that truly needed them. They failed because expensive, bulky designs and poor timing, because they were trying to push this in just as cellular networks were really expanding, quality was increasing, price was going down. That simply made satellite phones impractical for most consumers.
Wrong ecosystem.
It is the wrong ecosystem.
And maybe in terms of some of those design flaws, wrong blueprint.
Nah, possibly. And you might think these might be losers, but I don't think so. I think they are proving to be schmoozers. We're seeing smaller footprint, better tech, all the way through, more realistic price points. And I think the key to this, to go from schmoozer to success, is the integration with existing devices. And that will start building the market. And I think this started with iPhone 14, which supported sending emergency text messages via Global Star. And then 15 added satellite comms with roadside services in the States. And meanwhile, in 22, T-Mobile, I think, formed a partnership to use Starlink services on the existing LTE spectrum. And that's expected to be around later this year. And one of the things I think is going to make a big difference is that Iridium, which is the original
hundreds of
phone,
little satellites,
is going to launch Project Stardust, which is a standards-based satellite to cell phone service in 2026.
all going to pop off in satellites.
So lots of schmoozing going on there, and I think we could end up with a big success.
Lovely.
Which is unfortunately not the case for web portals,
No,
which
you
is
just
number
get
8.
positive then.
Those who are old will remember 20 years ago, these web portals were essentially a specially designed website that brought information from diverse sources like emails, online forums, search engines together in one place. Now that seemed like a great idea. The strategic flaw there was some heavy investment in web portals. The web portal companies were the sexy players of their day. But what they were was a digital land grab, trying to be everything to everybody, an all-encompassing destination. What they didn't do was focus on core competencies or unique or compelling customer value propositions, i.e. where was the difference? And many of these web portals collapsed during the dot-com bubble. And that just showed that spreading resources too thin without a clear strategy led to failure, particularly when a new generation of vendors were coming in with key components of the web portals, Google being the absolute example of that in search, and emerged doing a much better job. So ultimately, again, loser. But I think, if you look at history and unintended consequences, Google's late, we have to say now, workspace and Microsoft 365 and Teams emerged. There were a collision of the desktop and the web portal world. So some of the web portal legacy lives on, but still loser. So lastly, one of our favorites, the Windows Phone. So, hey, said Microsoft, we make the world's most successful desktop operating system. Let's grab ourselves a chunk of the exploding mobile market and give consumers more choice. Great, eh? But there was a strategic flaw, and we've touched on this before. Entering the smartphone market late with an operating system that lacked app support and distinct advantages over iOS and Android.
They were trying to be better than what they perceived the market to be, possibly including BlackBerry at the time. But they missed the different, which was the App Store.
I think this is also to do with one particular person and his need to be shown to have done something significant. I mean, don't lock the case after the horse has bolted.
Yes.
And I'm afraid the mobile operating system horse as well and truly bolted by the time Microsoft woke up. And it chucked everything at it. It chucked its strong brand. It struck piles of investment. But Windows Phone couldn't overcome the established ecosystems. Very, very strongly established ecosystems of iOS, Apple, and Android for everybody else. So in this case, 2's a company and 3 is definitely a crowd. Basically, nobody gave a flying about Windows Phone, and that just led to its discontinuation. And adding insult to injury, Microsoft then went off on to buy Nokia. At one time, the category leader in mobile phones, which was an absolute disaster. This is total loserville. It's Ballmer era hubris, and luckily, Microsoft appears to have learned its lesson.
Yes, absolutely.
So talking about lessons,
yes,
what have we learned here?
Big history lesson here. So I think one of the things we've learned is that, successful categories do take time and can take twists and turns. And if you don't look out far enough and you just go for better, and your yesterday's better and a different comes along, you are hosed.
You are absolutely hosed. So, we know that successful tech category strategy involves reframing consumer needs.
Or business needs.
Right. Identifying the right market conditions, aligning product offerings, bulletproof technology, which people often forget in the rush to get stuff out, and remorseless execution, strike after strike after strikes. What we're seeing here, in these 10 examples, are strategic missteps. Misjudging market readiness, overestimating consumer interest, failing to build robust ecosystems, entering markets without clear differentiation, and of course, some very poor timing.
Indeed.
And of course, what we always need, a bit of luck. But of course, we can't deliver luck, can we?
We can't.
So, unless any of your relatives are handy with a shamrock paw,
To be sure,
we can help all our listeners with discipline. And this is what it comes down to, discipline in a category design process, and help avoid such issues. Thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about category design, head to becategorical.com. If you need help designing and dominating your category, then get in touch. Contact details are in the show notes.